by the time that my lead arm was moving past this parallel position, it had already replanted. Now, replanted doesn't mean that I've shifted all my weight on there just yet. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Kerrod Gray here on the range today at Trump International in Dubai, here with my good friend Alex. Alex, pleased to have you on today.
Good to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex is one of the top coaches, most sought after coaches in the world. And today we're going to talk a lot about dynamic movement, where the body, the arms and the club should be, the sequencing of the golf swing, how to get that optimal body position and club position coming into the moment of impact to get the most out of your ball striking. Alex, I'm excited, pumped to have you here. Let's get into it. So when it comes to working on players' games, right? And we're working with a variety of players each and every day. Let's say you do 5, 6 lessons. Everyone's got different personalities and from different backgrounds.
Correct.
How do you manage, let's say one player comes in, he might be a basketball player. And the next is a corporate, and the next player is a tour pro. How do you weave in between those?
Well, that's the art, is being able to switch gears. Okay, because the conversations that you're going to have with one player, their athletic background, their playing history, maybe any injuries that they may have, you're going to tackle that in a certain way specific to that individual. Okay, you're having to put yourself in their shoes. You're having to be sympathetic, empathetic, and understand their history to adapt it to the lesson. And that's not likely going to work with the next person that you have.
It's so true, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think with us, that's the experience that we gain, is the ability to go, okay, I've completed that session with this player. We've gone through this journey. I need to be able to switch gears. I need to be able to change the conversation. I need to understand where they're coming from. And then that's going to work for that new individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose movement patterns, right? We've all got 2 arms, 2 legs.
Correct.
And the body moves in a certain way to produce an efficient motion for whatever sport you're playing. And there are some similarities between golf and other sports. But
Absolutely.
Let's say you have a player that you don't quite know what sort of background they've had. You'll ask them, what sports have you played as a kid? Now, let's say that I've played baseball. What sort of commonalities in those players would you see with their golf swing?
Okay, baseball is a great one, because you can have the conversations that are pitcher related. Okay, for anybody that's thrown a ball, whether it's baseball. Here in Dubai, we get a lot of cricketers. Okay, the conversations that I can go down with those players that help them understand the correlations between throwing mechanics and swinging mechanics. Okay, being able to turn through the trail side, push off the trail side, open up through the lead side. There's a lot of commonalities in those sports. So for baseball being a specific one, helping people understand, I use this one a lot, is understanding the value of being able to load and turn into the trail leg, as a pitcher would do if they were throwing towards home plate, is that they would get that lead leg up into the air. So they've shifted pressure, okay? They've turned into that trail side, and then they're going to drive off that trail side, banking that trail leg. Now that movement, if you're speaking of it with solely baseball language, you may not understand, okay, there's a lot of similarities to golf.
Correct.
But then you start putting golf terminology behind it, and you start going, okay, these are very similar. We take the golf club away, you just look at the athlete, look at the joints that are involved, look at how the mass of the body is moving, and you can really start seeing those ties.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see that the world's most powerful players, they have a shift of pressure generally before a shift of mass.
Correct.
Right. So for example, like let's say I was setting up here, if we were to have 2 players and the first player was generally just quite static over the golf ball, and they tend to move like this. What would be a great drill or exercise to add some athleticism to that movement?
For a player like that, I'd love to start incorporating some sense of dynamics. Okay, and that's typically the word choice that I would use. Getting them moving, helping them understand that pressure precedes movement. Okay, we want to feel like we can squeeze some pressure into that trail foot. The body's going to follow. The body's then going to want to turn into that and start working more into that trail hip. So a great way to get started with that is to start with a really narrow stance and the golf club into the follow through. I like to see the golf club start swinging. And as the golf club starts swinging, we can step into that trail side. Once we feel that pressure building into that foot, it signals us to then put more pressure and use that to post. Okay, so as we create that pressure shift, we can create that post and turn that trail hip behind us. So I'd start here, I'd step, I'd turn, and that's a great way for me to start feeling that turn. Now I can start working that through to the other side, okay? I can start narrow, club in front of me, step back, turn into that trail hip, and just let my body respond. Learning how to work from a posted position into that backswing, pushing off of it, again, similar to that baseball move, us being able to drive through to home plate, but driving off that trail leg, sending that energy down the line.
Yeah. So personally, in all my coaching, I see a lot of misconceptions around what creates a proficient backswing. A lot of players are under the assumption that you make a backswing motion, you stop, and then you make a downswing.
Correct.
And we know that from seeing the best players in the world, it's a lot more dynamic, and there's a stretch between what the lower body and the upper body does.
Absolutely.
And I use that drill all the time with my players. And a lot of the time, the first sort of rehearsals that you see them do, they might get this part, but then they never step early enough going forward. So if I'm going towards the camera here, right? So I would set up into this position. You'll see a lot of players go like this. We'll start with the club in front. They'll step back, which allows some freedom. So you've got some room to create a functional backswing position to give you the ability to swing down. But what we see with a lot of players is they'll do this, then they'll get to the top and they go, what do I do with this front foot? Right? So how do we know? And yes, there's a certain time in which we step in that drill. But if you were explaining that to someone, what sort of references would you use?
Throwing a ball. Throwing a ball, we're always, if the mechanics are good, and you can generally see if you ask somebody to throw a ball that hasn't thrown a ball before, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna throw before they step. Okay, the arm's gonna go before the lead leg goes. If you see somebody athletic or somebody that's got a throwing history, they're always going to just subconsciously step and then let everything come through. So relating that movement, again, taking another sport perhaps and saying, okay, if we wanna get the body moving, let the arm catch up, we're gonna create a lot more whip. We're gonna be able to create more energy. So that's, as you said, learning how to create that earlier motion, get the step happening while the golf club and arms are still working back in the motion, creates that dynamic stretch that normally, again, the high handicappers historically don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing what the ball actually does. Players stand over the ball and they fixate over it. They look at it and they go, okay, hit the ball, hit the ball, hit the ball. But golf, in fact, would be a lot easier if that was rolling. Like, let's say the ball was a little bit bigger and the club was a bit bigger. The reason being is you would naturally react. You wouldn't make that your target. You have an awareness of that. But at the end of the day, the target is a distance out in front of you. So what we would see with players is if they were playing a game like that, they would be matching the ball to the target. They would be walking in and they're making all these little micro moves with their feet, their pressure and their motion. And no one, when they do that, would be restricting anything. They wouldn't be focusing on, I need to keep my foot inverted in that angle, keep this trail knee as flexed as I can, lift my arms. So you'll find that if you create a lot more natural athleticism in the golf swing, the general motion of most players within reason, if they've played other sports throughout their life, is actually pretty proficient, isn't it?
Absolutely is. Well, you take, when I've worked with players that have come from backgrounds, whether it's like field hockey, whether it's like lacrosse, and they've been used to controlling an implement, okay, managing a ball of some sort, and they're dynamic. They're constantly in motion. The worst thing that I can do then is make them static. Okay, make them fixate over a given point. Okay, because they have this fluidity to how they move that we need to retain. Okay, now they look at magazines, they look at stock images, they look at reference points that they need to adhere to, and they often become more static than they need to. So I think that that's the key, is that being able to take a player's natural athleticism. And if we get the occasional player that doesn't have it, okay, they don't come from a sporting background. Maybe they were an artist, maybe they were an academic, and they just didn't get into sports. In that case, we need to start developing that athleticism before we get into all of the minute details of like impact precision.
And I think Jack Nicklaus was quoted in saying you got to swing the club through positions, not position the club through the swing. And too many players will be using the P system as a reference of where the club needs to be, but at the end of the day, they'll stand over there, and there's a big difference between putting the club here and everything in between. So if we're trying to achieve a certain position, you'll find that even just doing through little step drills like this one that we've talked about, a narrow stance, starting with the club in front, stepping back, and then the key here is as the club is swinging back, by the time the lead arm is level with the ground here, so the left arm for the right hander, we need to then step forward, which recenters, applies pressure, and then allows us to explode. So if I'm standing in this direction here, we set up, and the normal golf swing, what we'll see with the Tour Pros, they'll have a recentering back towards the target. Someone like Rory, you would see a significant and pound for pound even before he got really jacked, he was creating a lot of speed, right? Applying a lot of pressure down, so the ground pushes back and creates almost a whip effect down at the bottom of the ball. But if you're a player and you're setting up and there is no dynamic movement before you hit it, you're full with tension, you end up just making a swing that looks like this and swatting flies rather than trying to generate speed.
But you know, subconsciously, you're a good player. You stand over the golf ball, you're not static. Okay, and I see that with good players, they're over the golf ball. There's finger motion.
Yeah.
Okay. The feet are moving. There might be wiggling the toes a little bit. They're stepping side to side. The knees are moving a little bit, but there's motion.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. The golf ball's not moving, but the player is. You watch the average high handicapper, they stand still for 5-7 seconds over the golf ball before starting the motion.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to make an extremely athletic motion from a cemented position.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why, you know, Sergio got flack ages ago for having too many waggles, whatever it was, but there was a reason for it. Okay, and it was a sense of comfort and a sense of playing a sport.
Yeah.
And playing a sport requires us to be free and letting things just happen. And I think that trying to control all the elements just ends up producing emotion without any control.
Yeah, and that's why I love little drills like this. So let's go ahead, let's hit a couple, right? So we're gonna stand in nice and narrow. Do you like the feet touching together or slightly apart? What do you prefer?
Frankly, where you've got it right now, you're about a ball apart with the heels right now.
About a ball apart. We're gonna start with the club. What do you say, about a foot, 2 foot?
Yeah, if we start right now, we're kind of at 45 degrees, safe spot for most players.
Okay, perfect. And then as I swing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step at the same time. Great.
Yeah.
Now, as we were talking about before, we generally see the players, and I'll do a practice swing first. I'm going to start in front, we step, then we'll see players swing to the top and then go, I need to step.
Yes.
And it feels very out of sync. So narrow stance, club 45, we're going to swing, step, step, and you'll notice that this foot here, it actually lifted up. By the time that my lead arm was moving past this parallel position, it had already replanted. Now, replanted doesn't mean that I've shifted all my weight on there just yet. What I'm trying to focus on is I make this movement forward, swing, step, step, and then go through. Now, the way that I like to articulate this to players is that you are ramping up speed. And that visualization really helps. The ramping up speed, because we'll see a lot of players do this drill and they'll go swing, step, step, and then they'll go too aggressively with the upper body.
Yes, absolutely.
So you've got to feel that you're almost delaying that upper body movement and then creating speed past the ball.
Very similar to if you're trying to crack a whip, it's not this abrupt motion.
Correct.
There's a rhythm to it. Okay, and when you watch somebody, I always get this comment, when players are watching elite golfers, they always say, they make it look effortless, they make it look so smooth. And they do that because their organization of movement, everything is in order. Things are peaking. When we get really nerdy with this and we start talking 3D, the speed is peaking at the right point.
Correct.
So to the eye, aesthetically, that looks effortless.
Yeah.
Okay, when Rory hits a driver and carries at 330, he's not swinging out of balance. He's posting into that left side, he's controlling his mass into that left foot. He's fully in control of that motion. It's extremely dynamic. It's incredibly powerful, but he has control of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get me a little bit of Rory, huh?
Yes.
So I'm going to do 3 practice swings, and then do you get players hitting the ball doing the drill, or just do 3 practice swings, for example, and then hit the ball normal?
Yeah, I would have them do this drill. So initially I'd have them teed up.
Yep.
So a bunch of practice swings, getting used to brushing the ground, because the low point where we do make the divot might be a little bit different to what they're used to. Okay, oftentimes where we will be making the divot will be more left than where they start.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd have them get used to finding where that contact point with the ground actually is. So make 3 or 4 practice swings. Initially start with the golf ball on a tee just to make the task easier.
Okay, so swing, step, step. And what speed would you say? And do we want intent of hitting the ground, or is it more so just feeling the motion?
That's a brilliant statement. I don't want them to try to hit the ground.
Okay, great.
If they're doing the movement correctly, the golf club will get back to earth.
I love that. I love that. Let's do one more.
Yeah, that's it. That's the rhythm. So it's kind of anywhere from 70 to 80% of full effort.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. Okay, great. So I'll just give myself a nice little lie here.
Yes, sir.
Simulate a T, 8 iron in front. So lifting up. Now, important key when you're doing this drill, are we just bunching the arms up and moving them forward? Are we actually just extending slightly?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to
keep the arm length.
Stand up, forward, swing, step, swing, off we go.
Smooth. Dynamic looking.
Yeah, felt good. And it's certainly one of those drills and exercises that the more you do, you get comfortable. And even someone who's played golf my whole life, the sequence, when you hear tour players say they're getting stuck, that felt like they kind of came out of it as such, that a lot of the time they might not be able to put effectively their words as such relative to what a coach would be able to describe it. But those sensations and the feels that they've got, right, are usually because the golf swing isn't two sequence, correct?
Correct. The terminology that people use, everyone's going to use their own terminology. And oftentimes when we're trying to get across a point, that's one of the things I like to establish is letting them use their own language. Yeah. Okay, because if I'm putting words in their mind, they're not going to mean as much as their own language would dictate. Okay, so if a player says they're getting stuck, I want to know what they mean. Okay, and we'll figure out through trial and error what they're feeling, what they're sensing when they're getting into that undesirable state, but that's an important key.
Okay, great, fantastic.